So, this might just be a quick short story, but I felt I should type this anyway to get it off my chest, because everyone I tell the story to who was there that day never entirely believed me. The story takes place at a mall where the establishment just built a cute rubber playground. At the time I was 6 years old and was simply enjoying playing in the area as my family was shopping only a few feet away. Then came a wrinkly-looking tanned man with a long beard, skinny and balding. He approached a small Latino boy and began talking to him about cool toys he had in his van. Now, even at this time, I knew what stranger danger meant, but to my shame, I only stood there shocked that this was happening. More so, when this boy was agreeing to follow him where he kept the toys. I remember thinking, is this boy really going with this man? Doesn't he know what stranger danger is? If that didn't make things worse, the boy was so excited that he went ahead to invite his brother around the same age as I am, and they went off together. I honestly didn't know what I could do. Run off and into this giant mall after them and get lost. If I told my mom what was going on, would she even believe me? Where were their parents? But as I stood there watching them walk off together in the distance, so did the opportunity. I stopped playing and walked into the store where my mom was, and told her in a shy voice what happened. I was struggling to find the words, but I told her along the lines of, "Hey, Mom, I saw something strange happen. I saw an ugly old man walk off with 2 boys, like the kind of men you warned me about on the news." She just looked at me and smiled, not seemingly to entirely understand. I pressed the issue more, but she only responded, "Don't worry, I'm almost done shopping for shoes." She proceeded to shower me with compliments and the kind of tone moms reserve for when they playfully talk to babies, but this only made me more distressed. I could feel the time to act slipping away. I remember telling her, "I'm serious. There was a creepy man over there talking to children." I pointed in the direction where they once stood. I remember watching her face attentively and seeing a flicker of understanding, but she brushed it off as doubt settled in. That was the end of that encounter. A few days later, I was watching the news with my mom, and I saw the same boys. I felt placed in the spotlight again on what to do, but I knew my mom would never take me seriously. I was only 6, and my family were illegals who wouldn't want to involve themselves with the police anyway. I asked my mom what she thought about those 2 boys, but she had no opinion because she wasn't paying attention to the TV anyway. I often look back with regret at what I could have done. Parents may teach their kids what to do when these incidents happen to them, but I don't know what I could do as a witness. I felt as if I had done what I could do telling my mom, but I was too young in her eyes to be taken seriously. Screw that playground. By the way, I never ended up playing there after that incident. I'm 21 now, but I still see parents dropping off their kids there and shopping around the area. What a dumb place to have anyway, as it only encourages such negligence. Hey guys, I'm editing this story years later as I've come to think about this post randomly a lot. I don't think anyone will see this, but on the odd chance that they do, I just want to clarify a few things. I want to say 1, I'm so damn sorry. This is so badly written. Looking back at this makes me cringe a lot, and the litany of spelling errors. 2, I was really angry at my mother when I wrote this. The story is true. I and my mom had a lot of conflict due to this and my spiraling mental health. My mom had her issues. I had mine. She was a mother of 3 doing her best in spite of her husband being gone for weeks at a time. She might as well have been single, really. While my mom got mad at me when I attempted to mention this to her, I've come to see she was dealing with a lot herself and just couldn't quite deal with it, if that makes sense. Death. In recent years, we've come to find an understanding and have actually spoken about the incident. I do feel guilty for how angry I was at her. A lot of it was due to my own misconceptions and a certain terrible ex-husband's manipulations. He might have been the one to be angry for me when I told him the story. But after hearing how I treated my mom, I see why she never told him. Anyways, that's all. I just wanted to put that down as it's bothered me for a while. To get this started, to some it might not sound scary. But having a stranger press against you and block you from leaving is horrifying, especially when young. Normally, I try to cover for my mother, but as I've grown older, I kind of blame her a bit, especially after what she said. She just loves to invalidate her oldest daughter. I'd say I was around 8 at the time this took place. At the time we had to get mail from the post office in town. And so, seeing my mom get the mail, my brain decided, wow, I want to be cool, and get the mail, like mom. That childish need to prove that I was mature. Eventually, after begging time and time again, my mom let me get the mail, not of the actual story. I guess it was a weekend as the post office was closed, but you could still grab mail. Just know people that worked there were there. I asked my mom if I could grab the mail as we slowly pulled up outside the post office. She nodded yes and gave me the keys that had the mail key and a few other loud and jingly keys. I jumped out of the old van and ran up the ramp to the building, avoiding the stairs completely. I opened the door and saw a lady and a man getting their mail. But turning to my side, I saw an older man sitting in the corner staring at me. He gave me weird vibes even as a kid, but still I gave him a quick smile and wave. Bad move. The man smiled back, revealing his stained teeth. I walked past him and went to the mailbox. Me being me, though I forgot what key was what, and began fumbling awkwardly as the others grabbing mail left the building. After maybe 3 to 5 minutes of trying and failing, I finally unlocked it. I was so happy that I disregarded the man staring, as I grabbed the mail. With a quick click of the lock, I closed the box and began to walk away. I found the gaze of the man as he looked at me, a crooked smile across his face. The look he gave still gives me chills to this day, almost a decade later. I put my open hand against the door and began to push where a pair of arms reached around me. One hand forcefully pulling the door shut, and the other around the upper part of my chest, like my collarbone, pulling me into a tight, unwelcome and horrible hug. I froze. What was I supposed to do? I was always taught to respect adults, and I did. He had a strong scent of alcohol in him, so much so that I think I coughed a few times. He began to speak after a moment of just holding me there. The words he spoke scared me so bad, but now I only remember part of what he said, and I wished I didn't. He said, Hey, where are you going?" He spoke almost passive-aggressively. "Oh, I have to go. My mom is waiting for me." I stuttered. "Oh, okay." "Okay." He sounded defeated and began to let me go. Before I could break away, he held me tighter again. Tighter than before. Wait. I have a dog. You know." He had that stupid grin on his face. That scary grin. "That's cool. Yeah. And you should come with me and you can play with him," he encouraged. The scary thing is, I almost went with him at that moment. The next maybe 8 minutes felt like hours as he let me go and pulled me back hard into him. His scruffy beard and soft, dirty coat brushing against me. The details make my head hurt to remember, but he kept telling me no, almost ordering me to go with him. Finally, he seemed to snap. "All right, you're coming with me." "What? But I need my mom. I have her keys and she's waiting for me. Please." That was still my priority. Her keys and mail. "Nope, you're calling with me now." He opened the door and began to pull me out. In a moment of his weakness, I broke away, running to my mom in her car. I slammed the door shut, scaring my brother and my mother. I began shaking and crying, dropping the mail on the car floor. I shakily picked it up and handed everything to my mom as she demanded to know what happened. I told her everything, and she looked pissed. I was so glad she was on my side. I looked outside, tears still streaming down my face, and noticed a man looking at me through the car window from the top ramp of the building. I began to cry harder and panic as he started coming over. My mom stopped me as she noticed him coming. What was her reason for thinking he was completely harmless? He fell at the bottom of the ramp and tripped. My mom laughed at the creep and started driving away while she tried to comfort me, saying things like, "He was a harmless old drunk man and he didn't hurt you." Now, years later, I brought it up to my dad when I was at his house. My parents divorced 3 years after this incident, thinking he knew. But my mom never told him, so he was angry. He was pissed my mom didn't come for me sooner and that she hadn't done more. I told him not to confront my mom on this, and he agreed. Now, not long after telling my dad, I brought it up to my mom. My mom said I was being a drama queen and that I would never get hurt, that he never tried anything. I was furious, but now I don't know if I should be. I mean, I know drunk slurring, but this was almost spiteful, and his tone was demanding. My questions I'll leave off with are: what were his intentions? And am I right to be mad? I was nearly 13 years old and I was being raised by my grandparents. We lived in a little tourist town in Florida. They had problems with their 2 daughters as adults, my mother being the older of the 2, and they wanted to do everything that they could to make sure that I didn't turn out the same way, a do-over, if you will. Sir, needless to say, they were very strict. My aunt was having a good period. She had her stuff together. We were all very close. My aunt understood what it was like to be raised under a glass dome, metaphorically speaking, of course. They raised her too, after all. So, being as she was my only aunt, she made sure that the time we spent together was always super cool. I would stay over Saturday nights. We would go out and hang out at the pier, and she would let me hang out with my middle school boyfriend, who would always find ways to get wherever I was. My grandparents had no idea of any of these activities. Of course, I was just spending some quality time with my aunt and giving them a break. It was nice that I had a younger female figure since my mom wasn't around. One night when we were out, having fun, my aunt met this guy and they really hit it off. He was very nice and introduced himself to me. He went by Junior and at first was kind of charming and a talker. They exchanged numbers after hanging out a while and then we went home and went to bed. They ended up going out a bit more and my aunt had really liked Junior. He took her to his home and introduced her to his father and showed her around his land. He lived out in the woods in the middle of nowhere. I have lived in this town for 30 years and I still to this day couldn't tell you where it is. I was only there once. He was teaching my aunt how to shoot a gun. I remember her shoulder rocking back with the impact of the shot and surprising her. He had these weird flamenco dancing clothes in his closet. It was all seemingly harmless. I mean, everyone has their quirks. About 10 days, maybe 2 weeks later, we were again at the pier out by the payphones, talking about what to do that night and what to get for dinner. Junior and my aunt were in their late 20s, early 30s, and as much as she loved me, I imagine there were times that I got in the way. Well, anyway, we were at the pier and he was talking about how he had these painkillers. He offered me one. I declined, of course, and told him that I had a high tolerance to pain anyway and didn't need that stuff. He then, with a huge smile, asks me if he can see for himself, assuring me he won't really hurt me. He's just trying to have fun. This bastard twists my arm behind my back until I hear a pop. I start to cry and he laughs and says, "Oh, sweetheart, I was only playing." He said he had a high tolerance. I guess I was stronger than I thought I was being. I'm sorry. No need to ruin the good time we were all having. I go in the private pier office, which my granddad managed, crying. My aunt comes in and lets me know that she thinks it's messed up too, and that she talked to him about it. She goes back outside and he asks her what she is up to that night. She tells him that she isn't sure if I'm staying over because of what just happened. I was whining about going home. I was pissed that she hadn't decked him right there for hurting me. Well, he tells her that she should meet him under, let's call it, the Sunset Bridge at 2 a.m. on the other side of town. He says the stars are beautiful and you can listen and hear the fish. He also tells her he would love to see it with her, and they can dance under the moon. We were all from a fishing family and lived in a fishing town, so fishing activities under the bridge at late times weren't necessarily something that threw up a red flag. If it's dark and late, there won't be people around hugging all the fish. She tells him maybe, and we leave. I decide to spend the night after all, later sneaking in only if she pick up my boyfriend Charlie playing up on guilt points. She calls him when she gets home before he made our arrangement about Charlie and says that she can come, but she have me with her. He groans and is like, fine, all right, I guess she can come. Maybe she'll get tired and sleep in the car. About an hour after she called Junior the first time, I asked her about Charlie and she agreed. She sits down with me and hugs me and touches my face lovingly, apologizing for what happened with my arm. My aunt was an amazing woman, and I love her very much. She then calls him again and tells him not to worry. She's picking up Charlie, so I will have my own entertainment and they can have their time. He goes into a rage and starts bluttering and cussing about how it's too complicated now and he just wanted an intimate meeting with her, not a damn family reunion. He went on about how he didn't want to have to babysit a 13-year-old kid and her 14-year-old boyfriend. He hangs up after calling her a crazy underscore. She bewilderedly hangs up the phone and tells me what happened. We go about our night with pizza rolls and PlayStation, and things are fine. Calls her a few more times and drives by the house for a couple of weeks, but my aunt was having none of it. After a while, he left her alive just as swiftly as he had come. The whole affair lasted only a month, if even that, 3 weeks maybe, and all in all, it wasn't the craziest experience she has had with the man. Junior was soon forgotten, and we went about our business. Fast forward 2 years later, I'm almost out of middle school. My aunt had moved to a city about 40 miles away. I still live with my grandparents. They were still strict, but as they had gotten older, so had I. I knew a few ways around the rules. One day, my friend Frank and I missed the bus home from school and called our good high school friend Darla to pick us up and take us home after riding a bit. She had this big, beautiful red truck, and I would ride around in the cab of it, loving the freedom in the wind. We were smoking cigarettes and laughing, listening to the radio. The time I would have spent on the bus before my stop was just enough time to hit up the taco drive-thru. We cruised down the road a bit before heading back to Frank's and my separate houses. He lived just down the road. We had a lot of fun that day. She dropped me off first. My grandparents came outside and they were heavily confused at the sight of an unknown vehicle, and even more so when they saw I had gotten out of it after letting her be the one to explain. She was older, cooler, and more responsible. My parents thanked her for being kind enough to take me home. They said how lucky I was that she had just happened to be there to help me get home. The things we do to our grandparents, That was the last time we ever saw my friend. She didn't show up for work for 5 days. I can't speak for everyone, but I assume she had just run away. Dollar's parents were going through a nasty divorce. The dad had a hot new girlfriend, and the mother was very bitter about it. Rightfully so, I guess. It was embarrassing for all the kids. Her truck wasn't left behind. I figured she got tired of her parents acting like infants and took off. I missed her, But she was in a whole other league of freedom and coolness. 16 is a whole different life than 14, especially when you are in different schools. I wished her well, maybe even a little envious that she got out of this town and I was still here. I hadn't heard anything for 2 weeks about her when, at about 9 o'clock at night, my grandparents got a phone call to turn on the news. Darla's body was found out in the woods. She had been strangled to death and just left out there. I don't even know for how long. I was devastated, but I was so joyful that I had that last experience with her, but also so saddened and horrified. Xi was so young, barely older than myself. She was about to be 17 in just a short time. It was a very sad time for our town. The good and the bad news is they caught the guy that had done it. He confessed after some very incriminating evidence, and during his questioning also confessed to killing his girlfriend, who had been missing for about 8 years, and also his father. When they showed his mugshot on the screen and said his name, I swear I almost passed out. There, clear as day on the screen, staring back at me, was a picture of Junior. I had no idea they knew each other. I can't even imagine what would have happened if we had gone under the bridge that night. Investigation Discovery Channel did a piece on it a couple of years back. I was shocked to see it on the TV. The memories came rushing back, and I decided to write them all down. I literally have a newfound appreciation of life now that I'm old enough to understand just how close I could have been to being killed. My aunt lived on to make awesome new memories with me. I have a beautiful life now, with my husband and 3 boys that most likely wouldn't have happened if things had gone differently that night. This is a story that I'm not supposed to be telling, a family secret that I'm not supposed to know about. When my grandfather was younger, he became the principal of an elementary school. He was in his late 20s, early 30s at the time, and despite being young, he was a born leader. He was a great principal and everyone loved him. I can attest to that as I attended multiple awards ceremonies for him, and the respect and admiration he received was crazy. There was a young boy at the school who was having behavioral issues in class, and my grandfather saw that the kid didn't have a lot of parental support. So he called in his father and had a talk with him about spending more time with his son and just a general parenting session. It turned out that all the boy needed was his dad's attention, and after a few weeks he was a happy model student. Whenever my grandfather would leave school late, he would see that Dad was playing basketball with his son after he got home from work. It was one of those moments that he took pride in being able to make a difference in people's lives. However, not everything had such an easy solution, and my grandfather found himself having to deal with an employee, Stanley, the janitor, who was showing up to work drunk. Stanley was an alcoholic with a mean streak, and my grandfather tried on multiple occasions to deal with his behavior. Finally, one day, Stanley showed up so drunk that my grandfather sent him home and called the superintendent to let him know he was going to fire him the next morning after he sobered up. He then warned them to let him deal with it when Stanley was sober because he was not a stable person. As it goes in these kinds of stories, the superintendent was furious and decided that he was going to call Stanley himself and fire him, despite my grandfather's warning. No one called my grandfather to tell him about it either. So, he was completely in the dark and thought he could deal with it in the morning. Stanley was furious and went to the school that evening. He searched the offices, my grandfather's included, and tore things apart until he finally had what he wanted. He was in a blaze of fury, and on his way out he saw a father and his son playing basketball. He walked towards them and pulled something out of his trousers. It was a gun. He then proceeded to shoot the little boy, killing him instantly. The father was so upset he was hysterically crying, but somehow managed to get the gun away from Stanley and shoot him. My grandfather was called to the elementary school immediately by the police because there were 2 dead bodies. The little boy and Stanley were dead. But what was even worse was the crying from the father and him saying that he couldn't save his son. It was clear that he would never forgive himself for that day. My grandfather was pulled aside by one of the police who had searched Stanley for evidence. They had found a hit list of the people that he was willing to kill and all the addresses of those people that he had retrieved when he searched the offices. My grandfather was number 1 on that list. So, if it weren't for that father, it's likely that I would have never been able to meet my grandfather, and possibly my mother and grandmother would have been killed. If Stanley had been able to complete his mission to this day, I get goosebumps whenever I hear that story, and it's just so chilling. My grandfather never uttered a single word about this after his initial recount, and my mother made me swear, too. Never tell him I knew he carried the weight of that boy's death on him until the day he died. Edit. I just looked up records online. Finally found some info and spoke with my mother. There was another man who Stanley killed. He had killed another janitor that evening, and he had thought the boy and the father had seen him. So then Stanley tried to shoot the father and wrestled with the man to get the gun. In that process, it went off and killed the boy. Sorry for the mistake in the story. It makes it almost worse. This happened almost a year ago, and it's all thanks to my little underscore of a husky. She was a super cute 10-pound fluff ball at the time this happened. I was living in a pet-friendly apartment complex, and I had just bought her. I picked her up around 10 a.m. that morning and went to visit my parents' house so they could meet her. I stayed all day and didn't arrive home until 8 o'clock to 8:30 p.m. We walked in and I introduced her to the apartment, played with her, took her to pee, and went to bed. During the night, she woke me up twice to pee and wind a bit since she was in a new environment. But she wasn't too loud, and I quickly calmed her down by putting her on my bed, and she crawled on my head and fell asleep. Since I read that huskies are very active dogs, I decided to take her on her first walk on the sidewalk beside the building. As we started our walk, we passed the side of the building that shows the balconies. I lived on the 3rd floor, and the guy who lived directly below me was standing on his balcony following me on his phone. I felt a bit weird about it, but I didn't think too much about it since the landlord had actually told me before. He mentioned to her that he enjoyed me living above because I was quiet. Also, a lot of the tenants in the complex were having a fit over my husky and would just hold her and pet her whenever they saw her, though. I thought he was just filming her to show his friends or to talk about her later with me. I spent the whole day with her, getting her familiar with me and her new home. The night rolls around and I took her out before I went to bed around 11:30. I walked past a red car that was running, but didn't have his lights on, so I couldn't see who was in the car. I didn't think much about it because it wasn't unusual for people to sit on their cars waiting on someone. I lived right beside a college and have many college students living in the building, so I thought maybe they were waiting for someone so they could head off to a party or something. While I didn't think much of it, I was still aware of my surroundings, since I am a young woman alone at night. My puppy finally used the bathroom after 20 minutes of sniffing around, and I picked her up and walked past the car to go inside. The driver's side suddenly opens and a tall man steps out and yells, "Are you allowed to have that dog?" almost aggressively. I turned around and noticed it was my neighbor and replied, "Oh yeah, you're allowed to have dogs here." I was confused as to why he was asking that since he's lived here longer than me, but I answered him anyways. He points at my dog. "No, you dumbass. Did you get permission from the landlord to have that thing?" As soon as he cursed at me, I clutched the dog closer to my chest and just nodded, still confused and now a bit frightened. "Seriously, I know you were lying. You don't have permission. I videotaped you this morning and sent it to the landlord, and she said that she had no clue about her. I know he's lying because I did tell her about my dog, but I just hadn't paid the deposit yet since it was the weekend, and she was fine with that. So I explained to him, but he cursed at me more, calling me a lying underscore, saying we kept him up all day and night with her running around and stomping. I know that this was impossible because a dog her size couldn't stomp or make noise to keep him up all night. She hasn't barked or hauled once and just whines at times, but that's not loud enough to keep him up all night, especially since I was asleep next to her and I slept fine. I finally interrupted and apologized to cut the connival short because he was just getting more angry as it went on. He pauses and says, "Shut up, you don't mean that. And I'm calling the landlord tomorrow to report you and your dog. I swear if she keeps me up again tonight, I'll mess you up." I freeze at that point because I know he meant it, even though we never had any problems until that day. I've heard him harassing other neighbors and even pulling out a gun on one over their dogs. However, because he's buddy-buddy with the landlord and doing drugs and probably having sex, he's never gotten in trouble. Despite being scared, my dumbass suddenly gets pissed off for getting threatened for no reason, and I stammer out, I have permission to have this dog, so I'll be there with you tomorrow when you try to report me. You're lying and upset because you hate dogs, even though you live in a pet-friendly apartment, which was a stupid move on your part. Yes, I know. I was stupid and the words just vomited out of my mouth. Hey, just go on before he beat your ass. You're not going to do anything tomorrow, but get rid of that damn dog. I didn't know there was someone else in his car as I was standing closer towards the driver's side. My fear completely took over and I just ran away and into the building. I was on the second floor landing when I heard the lobby door slam and footsteps pounding up the stairs. I let out a scream and hurried up the third floor, down the hallway and into my apartment. I locked all the locks and put my door stopper against the door bit from outside my window. Closer towards the end of the hall, I hear laughter and then they walk away. I locked myself in my bedroom and cuddled my puppy as I cried. I stayed up all night, afraid that they would try to break in and kill me and my dog. The next day, I called my mom to pick me up and didn't come back until 2 weeks later when I moved out. I brought all of my male cousins for extra protection that day. In the end, I had to move back in with my parents because I was afraid to be out on my own, but I ended up getting my deposit in last month's rent back. I never reported the couple because I didn't know their names and just didn't want to get involved with them anymore. And I felt discouraged because my landlord practically took its side and just rushed the process for me to leave by quickly giving me my money back if I didn't involve her boss or the police. After that day, I learned, she wasn't the landlord, but merely the apartment manager. Looking back, I wondered if I could have sued. This past Monday, my co-workers and I returned to our hotel from a day of work out in the field. Rebecca and I walked into our rooms, and as we stood outside of our rooms, I opened mine, and I saw someone in the bathroom. I said hello. Nobody answered. My first instinct was that it was a cleaning lady in there for some reason. And then I saw my bag with my clothes in her hands. I said to my co-worker, "There's a woman in my room." Then I asked the woman, "What are you doing with my stuff?" It gets a little fuzzy here because I can't remember everything I said and what she said, but she gets mumbling about how her key still worked, how it still worked, and that's how she got in. I was in shock, and she was obviously very flustered, having been caught mid-robbery. She dropped my bags and fumbled around with her purse and a white plastic bag. By this time, my corker was behind me watching all the insanity unfold. This woman was scrambling and walking towards the door. And I said, "What's in the bag?" thinking it was probably my stuff. And so she said, "No, no, no, it's just my thanks, just my stuff. I'll show you." And so she did. I looked and I didn't see anything of mine. And so, since I'm obviously in shock at this time, I let her leave. I went into my room and it's been ransacked. I did a quick look around to see if anything had been taken. All of my electronics were still there. And I went into the bathroom and I saw my underwear, my bikini, and my clothes shoved into my own bags randomly. Even my passport was shoved in there. Then I looked on the counter and I saw that she got into my medication. I'm not sure what was going through my head at the moment other than I wanted it back. So I ran out the door to go find her. I ran to the laundry room downstairs and out to the sides of the hotel, and I didn't see her. I realized I was never going to find her. So my coworker and I went down to the lobby to tell them what had happened, and then we called the police. We went back up to my room to wait, and I noticed that there was a metal bat on my bed, a little larger than the one those novelty wooden bats you can get at a baseball game, but there's also a flashlight on the end. She must have left it behind in a hurry. She also left behind a necklace that must have fallen out of her bag when she was scrambling with mine. I was mostly freaking out at this point because I thought that she had gone away with my medication that I needed. The police got there and took our statements and looked around the room as well. One thing that I noticed was that there were bits of drywall in the sink, and I pointed that out to the cops, but none of us really knew where it came from. We started looking at the door and the windows to see if she pried her way in somehow, but there was nothing, sir. We just kind of went with the idea that she had a spare key or something, even though the hotel front desk was adamant that there was no way that could be. The officer that came brought 2 more officers as backups because they thought that woman might still be in the vicinity. But after our statements were taken, there was nothing else they could really do, so they left. I sat down to finally make some calls to tell people, and as I'm on the phone, I'm thinking about the drywall in the sink, and it still didn't make sense to me. So I'm on the phone and looking at the drywall on the mirror and on the wall right above it. Then it hit me. I got my coworker and asked her to help me pull out this mirror on the wall. And we took the mirror down, and there's a hole there just big enough for a desperate junkie to squeeze through. I asked Brian and Rebecca if I should call the cops again to let them know that I found this. And my boss said there's still 2 cop cars in the parking lot. So I went down to tell them, and the female cop kind of rolled her eyes, but the young guy said, "I'll come check it out." They both came back up, looked in the hole, and found a pillow, blankets, cigarettes, clothes, and toothbrushes. This woman had been living in the wall behind my mirror for who knows how long. She had access to me in my room at all times. I know it might be hard to picture, but there was a crawl space about 2 feet wide in between the 2 rows of rooms. One of the officers called the original officer to come back and take pictures of this. I explained to him what was going on, and all I hear over the radio is, "No freaking way." He comes back, takes pictures, and it's just as mind-blown as the rest of us. Obviously, we packed up and left immediately. What's even crazier is, she has probably been there a long time. The last time we stayed at this hotel, I would randomly smell cigarette smoke, and I assumed somebody was smoking in their bathroom, and it was traveling through the vents. But nope, a junkie was smoking just on the other side of the mirror. She had access to the other rooms, too. The holes in the walls were from a renovation, and the hotel hadn't properly patched them and just covered them up with the mirrors. She could have been hanging out in people's rooms when they were gone. Anyways, this was insane, and I'm taking a little time off. This happened a few years ago when I was bartending in college. I was coming home down a stretch of divided highway at around 3 a.m. when I noticed a car heading towards me in the wrong lane. I doubted myself at first and thought the car was on the other side of the highway. Sure enough, a white Ford sedan passed me at a really high speed, at least 90. It's worth noting for later that I also drive a white Ford sedan. I was used to drunk idiot drivers in the middle of the night, so I pulled to the side of the road and let them pass me. I had a moment of clarity and thought to call the police, thinking this person could hurt themselves or somebody else. The dispatcher answered, and after telling them which road and exit mile marker I was at, they told me they would send a car. The state police station was only a few exits away, so I figured they would send somebody and I would just drive home. As I headed back onto the highway, I noticed some lights a few miles ahead of me. I live in a more rural part of southeastern Pennsylvania, and traffic at 3 a.m. tend to be truckers and cops. The car gained on me as I was getting up to speed, so I stayed in the right lane and waited to be passed. Instead, they flipped on their high beams, making it uncomfortable to drive, and rode my tailgate. At this point, I thought I was going to be pulled over by the police, especially for the fact considering I drive a white Ford sedan and had just called about a different white Ford sedan. So, I grabbed my registration from the glove box. Suddenly, the car behind me audibly slammed on the brakes and stopped in the middle of the highway. They must have shut off their car because the lights went out and I saw what looked like the same Ford sedan from earlier. Still, I thought this may have been a police car. They have a roof rack, and it could have looked like I had reached for a gun in my glove box or something. I panicked and called 911 for the second time and asked the dispatcher if they had sent a cruiser to investigate. The dispatcher was a little curt with me and assured me that they sent somebody out. Dispatcher said, "We sent a trooper out to find the car, sir." Me, I only ask because somebody is following me and acting weird. It could be a cop, and I think I freaked them out by getting my registration. Are you pulled over? No, they didn't turn on their lights. Okay, let me try to get to the trooper we sent out. As she was talking, the car again sped towards me and stopped inches away from my bumper. Again, their high beams were on, and again, they slammed on their brakes. I told the dispatcher, "I'm pretty sure this is not the police behind me." The car sped to my bumper again and turned their high beams on, this time laying on the horn. Hearing this, the dispatcher asked me what was happening. "What's happening?" "Did you honk?" "No, that's the car behind me. I don't think it's a cop. I'll try to get the trooper again, but I don't think that's him behind you." For some reason, this is what shook me. Before that, I was thinking I would get pulled over and maybe get a ticket. Up until then, I was going the speed limit and trying to avoid getting pulled over. I told the dispatcher, "I don't care if I get pulled over. I'm speeding, and if they put their lights on, then I'll pull over." I started to accelerate, and the person behind me just kept up with me. The speed limit was 55, and they kept on my bumper the entire time, but this time they were swerving. I tried to signal for an exit and then bail on it, but they followed. At the next exit, I took the off-ramp and continued onto the on-ramp, and the car behind me followed the whole time. I thought about trying to go to a Wawa, a convenience store, or gas station. That's pretty much the only populated place in southeastern Pennsylvania at 3 a.m. But the dispatcher and I thought that would be unsafe. She was calm and talking to another person, trying to send police to me. The other person, maybe a supervisor, asked if I could drive to the state police station. Realizing that I was one exit away, I told her I was coming there, and she said that she would have troopers meet me outside. As I pulled off to the exit, the car followed me. I blew a few red lights trying to get to the police station, and the car tried to pull into the other lane to pass me or pull up alongside me. Once the police station was in view, I put on my turn signal, and the car slammed on its brakes again, turned off its lights, and turned into a parking lot. The story kind of ends anticlimactically as I pulled into the police station and met the troopers. Two of them went to find the car, and I stayed with the third trooper. I thanked the dispatcher and the supervisor, and the state trooper escorted me home after taking a statement from me. I was never called to follow up or testify, so I can only assume the person didn't get caught. Spill. A few years ago, my friend Taz and I set out on the Great American Road Trip. We were going to drive from New York to Los Angeles, zigzagging through the country for 6 weeks. We were both in our early 20s and pretty broke. And as my mom had been a long-haul trucker, I suggested that to save a ton of money, we should sleep in the back of her hatchback. It was a pretty cozy setup. We bought some blankets and sheets at Goodwill and cut one of them up to make curtains. By the end of the first week, we'd gotten so set up camp in about 10 minutes. Luggage moved to the front, curtains up, bedding laid down, and out for the night. We slept in the parking lots, free campsites, rest areas, and basically anywhere it seemed safe and semi-legal. There was never a night after the first night where we felt scared until the last week of the trip in Arizona. We were near Flagstaff and had gotten pretty used to our routine. We didn't go on a set schedule and would never drive more than 3 or 4 hours a day with no destination really in mind outside a few must-see landmarks. We drive to places we found the night before on Google and take suggestions from other campers, locals, and people we met. We'd also gotten very good at making friends. We went to Denny's with a group of rednecks. We met at a campsite in the back of their pickup because I got hungry and overheard them saying they were going to go. We met an 80-year-old cowboy who took us out drinking and taught us to line dance at a country bar. Hope you're still kicking, Grandpa Mac. Play the guitar of some musicians in the middle of a thunderstorm. Got fed breakfast and dinner by tons of campers who invited us to hang out with them and spent the 4th of July with a family who basically adopted us to their campsite. Grandma gave us some weed candy. Basically, every encounter we had with a stranger was a positive one. This night didn't look to be any different. We found a free campsite on Google and drove up into the woods following our GPS. We were pretty far out of town and something seemed a little bit off when we pulled up to the campsite. There was one RV parked and 2 cars further up in the trees. Pulled up near the RV and a man opened the door. Teasy waved hello and he just stared at her. His expression was completely blank. Then, as if she hadn't said anything, he just slowly closed the door again, staring at us the entire time. Figuring he just wanted some privacy and thought we'd be obnoxious, we pulled further down the road and found a flat spot to park the car. Instead of our usual routine of setting up camp immediately while it was still light out, we goofed around for a while, smoking and laughing and taking dumb photos of ourselves. Tess pointed out a campfire further down the campsite, and we decided to go be friendly. We'd met so many cool people in the previous 5 weeks by just going up and offering beer, just chatting. So we wandered over near the campfire. There were 2 men, the owners of the cars we'd seen earlier. They seemed friendly, and we sat down to chat with them. They were drinking and smoking, and we sat down and had a beer with them. One of the men seemed pretty off, and we came to find out that the 2 of them didn't actually know one another. The older man was definitely on some sort of drugs. He was spinning in circles and talking about UFOs. However, he seemed harmless. This left us chatting with a younger man who claimed to be a former park ranger. He was handsome and easygoing, and we spent several hours just chatting about our trip, families, and everything. Then he started talking about the bear. He's seen a bear earlier in the forest. Teasy didn't believe him, and he pulled out his camera to show her photos of it. It was very close to the campsite, and we both were a little freaked out. It wasn't unheard for one of us to go get up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, so the idea of a bear hanging around in the night spooked us. The ranger just laughed, and then his expression changed completely. It's hard to describe, but his voice seemed somehow cold, he said. If you get out of your car in the middle of the night, it's not a bear you should be worried about. Kai kept waiting for the laugh or for him to nudge Taz with his elbow, The jokes on the foreigner and the city girl. Right. He never did. I laughed awkwardly and made a dumb joke about how serial killers are in the woods. My friend laughed as well and joked about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We moved on to another subject, but within 5 minutes, the ranger had come back to it and was talking about something grabbing us from a car in the middle of the night. No matter how much we tried to steer the conversation away from serial killers, he kept latching on. The older man was high as a kite at this point and was staring at the stars, not talking. We just awkwardly laugh and sip our beer and try to get the conversation going somewhere else. Then the ranger stood up and walked towards the cooler to get another beer. At this point, it's pitch black out and I can't see anything outside the circle of light from the campfire. The beer cooler was outside of that circle. Suddenly, there was a red dot in the darkness, and it took a moment for me to realize that. It's a camera. The ranger is holding a camera. He had taken a photo of us. I could see the screen on the digital camera lit up. Now, it wasn't odd for people we met to ask to take pictures with us. My friend Tez is gorgeous with dark hair and blue eyes, like a young Megan Fox, and we were friendly. People like having pictures of themselves. It was an entirely strange thing to have this person taking a photo of us without asking or even indicating that's what he was doing. We were both staring at him like deer in the headlights at this point. But instead of realizing what he was doing was a bit weird, he checks his camera, adjusts some things, and takes another photo, this time with a flash. No asking us to smile, no proposing a group photo, and no explanation. After this photo, he comes back to the fire and sits down. Not a word was said about the picture. At this point, Taz and I are mutually freaked out. We make some BS excuse that we need to go set up our campsite and nope the hell out. When we stand to leave, the UFO guy smiles and says to have a good night. The ranger guy, however, looks at us with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes and says, "Be careful out there. There's more than bears in the woods." Every hair in my body stood on end. I wasn't alone in my discomfort either, because Tess laughed her response out and pulled me away from the campfire towards the car. We rushed back to the car, which we only found in the dark by referencing the RV and jump in the front seats. My friend Taz is all but hyperventilating. Why did he take pictures of us? I was shaking, I responded. I heard that serial killers sometimes warned their victims. She stared at me for a second and locked the car doors. Do you think he just took victim photos of us? We both freaked out. She's in a full panic and turns the headlights on in the car. I immediately yell at her to turn them off because now he knows exactly where our car is. Remember, we didn't set up camp that night, so we didn't need to tear anything down. So, we just put the car in drive and floor it out of the campsite. As we got into the dirt road, the ranger was walking towards our car with that same cold expression. Music, surprisingly, this is one of those stories I forgot about until a few days ago when I was talking to a school friend on call and I got reminded of it. She was pretty freaked out when I told her, and so was I thinking about it again. This happened when I was roughly maybe 7, or 8, so some of the details are fuzzy, but I remember it pretty vividly. This may seem like unimportant context, but my family had just moved to America, and we're renting the top portion of your regular suburban house in a pretty safe cul-de-sac. I had friends. They were triplets, about 3 or 4 houses down, not far at all. Every day I'd go hang out with him, and around 9 or 10 at night, my older brother, around 11 or 12, I'd say, would make the 2-minute walk and come get me and walk me home since I was pretty young. One night, he came to get me as usual. The sun wasn't fully down, but it was getting pretty dark. We started down the walk as normal when he started casting glances over his shoulder. I didn't really notice until shoved me hard away from the sidewalk and between two houses. Each house had a fence that separated their backyard. Not ours, though. And he made me crouch behind the fence. I remember being really scared, but more so confused since I had no idea what was going on. More specifically, he was a pretty big prankster. Once he convinced me my older sister crashed her car into the ocean. So I didn't really believe him when he turned and said, "Walk behind the houses." I think someone's following us. Looking back now, he was probably trying to keep me calm. However, whatever calm was left in my tiny 8-year-old body was gone the moment I turned around and looked. The man had followed us behind the houses, and he was just by the edge of a few houses down near a different fence line. He had a black hoodie on with a hood up, black sweatpants, and white sneakers. I have pretty bad eyesight now due to some health problems, but back then it was crystal clear, and I could see with horrifying clarity that his jaw was hung open, like he was just standing there with his jaw open. It was horrifying. I think now that I'm older, maybe he had some kind of medical condition that affected his jaw, or maybe he did crack. I don't know. But back then, I could have sworn I was seeing some kind of demon. Anyway, my brother, when he saw me looking and getting ready to freak out, told me to just run as fast as I could to her house. We booked it. Neither of us looked back, but we were scared out of our minds. Like I said, we only rented the top portion of the house, so the bottom with a sliding door in the backyard belonged to some other tenant. I don't remember if she was home or not, but I remember tugging that thing open and locking as fast as I could. And when I looked up, he was there in the yard, only a little bit away from the door, staring at us. And my brother told my sister and my mother immediately. My father was away on a work trip, but nothing came of it. Not until the day after. We went to go meet my dad at his warehouse, which had a small live-in portion above it, where we let go around until he was ready to head home with us. Around dusk, he came up and told us we might have to wait since the police were here. He walked us around to the back window of the small area to show us police all around the backyard area of the warehouses. There are a few in a line to a white van parked on the grass by the edge of the woods. Like I said, I was pretty young, so I don't remember many details of what actually happened. But I do remember my dad, who hadn't been told about the day prior, telling us that they found a man and a woman in the van. The man, he said, had his mouth hung wide open. He seemed really disturbed, telling me about the whole thing and wouldn't answer any more questions about the woman. Maybe she was dead. I've got zero idea. I do know they were arrested on trespassing charges. I don't know anything else, and I haven't asked about it, and I doubt he'd remember. It's been over a decade, and he's pushing 70, but it freaks me out to this day. I still can't believe it happened, and I don't have any answers for it. I talked to my brother briefly about it and hopes he remembered more than I do, but all I got back was a long tirade about whatever medical condition the guy probably had for his mouth to be like that. He's an annoying medical student now. Sometimes I think maybe he didn't mean any harm and was just drugged out of his mind. But this wasn't. The world's safest neighborhood, and doesn't explain why or how he showed up at my dad's workplace. So this happened when I was 19 or 20. I'm 31 now, and I really drink or go out anymore. But last weekend, a friend of mine who hadn't seen in a couple of years asked me out, and we ended up going to a club on the same street where this story takes place and reminded me of it. The legal drinking age in Brazil is 18, so people here start partying pretty early. And let's face it, no one really knows their limits when they start drinking. My friends and I had gone to this club. I honestly can't remember the name right now, but I know it closed down a couple of years back. We had a great time, man. The sun was coming up as we were leaving. Most clubs here give you a credit card when you walk in. where you either put in the money you plan on spending or they work as a personal digital tab, where bartenders add up what you're drinking and you pay for it on the way out. I paid for my stuff and sat outside to wait for my friends who were taking a long time to get out, probably due to being drunk AFT. As I'm sitting there, I noticed a car across the street, 2 dudes sitting in the front seats, one out of the car trying to make this clearly drunk out of her mind girl get inside as well. She's mumbling, stumbling, struggling to keep her eyes open, and she's saying, "No, I don't want to go," over and over, shaking her head, clinging on to the car door as the guy keeps telling her to let go and get inside, that they're just going to her friend's apartment to drink some more. It'll be fun. Come on, I watch, wondering if I should do something if no one else is seeing this happening. I look at the club security guard, and he looks at me and shrugs, like it's not his responsibility. I look back at the girl, and I'm really uncomfortable, but also scared. My friends are still nowhere to be seen. I'm alone. The security guard is clearly not doing anything, and there are 3 of the guys. What if they decide to try and get me, too? The girl says one more time that she doesn't want to go with them. And before I realize what I'm doing, I'm getting to my feet and shouting, "Hey!" The guy stops trying to push the girl into the car for a moment and looks at me. She said she doesn't want to go. "Dude," I say, starting to make my way across the street. Even though my hands are shaking and my voice is probably not the most convincing, she's our friend. She's just drunk and being cranky. It's all good. "We're just going to take her home," he says. He seems a bit nervous and not exactly angry, which makes me feel a bit better or less scared. "Do you know them?" I ask her, and she just shakes her head. No, using the door as support to keep herself on her feet. Creep number 1, the one who, boss, trying to push her in the car, looks at me, then at his friends, who seemed frustrated, but started saying, "Come on, man, let's go. Just leave it." Creep number 1, now looking a bit pissed off, grabs the girl and pushes her towards me before getting into the car, and they all leave. The girl nearly falls in her face, but I grab her and we walk back to the front tick of the club, my heart slowly going back to its normal rate. Only then do I realize my friends have come out and we're watching everything from across the street with confused faces. We all meet random people at clubs, at the door, and walking down the street. So, you probably thought I'd met someone. I start asking her what happens if she's alone and where all her stuff is. And she's an incoherent mess, mumbling about losing track of her friends in her purse. Still, she doesn't even know how she paid her tab to leave. I ask for some help from the security guard. He says he can't leave his spot and that he can't do anything. I explained what's going on to my friends and they talk to the hostess about it, who begrudgingly goes and checks to lost and found. Her purse is thankfully there, minus the money she had in her wallet, and we managed to call her parents. I talked to her mom because the girl can't explain anything and I promised to stay there until the mom comes to get her. 30 minutes later, the mom arrives and I've never seen someone look so relieved and terrified at the same time. She thanks me and my friends profusely and offers us a ride home, but as we live in the next town over, she just drives us to the subway station. In the middle of all the craziness, I forgot to exchange numbers with any of them. So, I've never heard of that girl or her mom again. But I hope she learned to be more careful with how much she drinks or who she talks to in clubs. Also, shame on her friends for not looking out for her or trying to find her when they realized she was missing. Though maybe they were all just as messed up as she was, who knows? I know what I did was probably a bit reckless, but I wouldn't be able to just watch that car drive away and live with myself.